Well, happy Monday, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Things from the Big Story podcast. We have made it to week 4, and I have a new guest you've never been on before in all 4 weeks. Welcome, Andrew.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited. I was telling Andrew before we got started that I really thought I would be sitting alone more often, and so far, that hasn't been the case, and so I'm really, really grateful for that.
Bro, we are here for you.
Yes, thank you. Well, today is Monday, January 26th, and we're going to be covering what we read in the one-year Bible, January 19th through the 25th this past week. In the Old Testament, we read Genesis 39 all the way through Exodus chapter 2, verse 10. So finished out Genesis, started into Exodus, and of course in the New Testament, following along with the story of Jesus in the end of Matthew chapter 12 all the way through the beginning of Matthew chapter 17. In the Old Testament, we stuck with Joseph for almost all of our reading this week. We saw basically the whole story of Joseph. As we read, we see Potiphar's wife trying to entrap him, for a lack of better words, him being imprisoned for that, being the interpreter of dreams both in prison and then getting him released from prison through that gift of God, and then given power over all Egypt because of his dream interpretation. And the famine is coming, and he is given the power to make that all happen, to prepare the land for the famine that's coming. And of course, because the famine has struck, his brothers come to Egypt. And we see that whole story unfolding as that takes place. And by the time we finish out the story of Joseph, his entire family, the nation of Israel, has now come to Egypt to live in his land, to be taken care of and be, saved from their loneliness, I guess you could say. We see both Jacob and his dad, or Jacob and then Joseph, both passing away at the end of our reading this week. And then just for a moment in the Old Testament, we transitioned into Exodus, and we talk about a new character in Egypt, and his name is Moses. And so we see the beginning of his story in the Old Testament. Was there anything I missed in the Old Testament? I tried to get most of them there.
Man, I think you did a great job recapping that. I think we'll be talking about Moses for a little while after Joseph.
Yes, we will. I'm actually kind of excited, obviously. I talked about Moses in my sermon yesterday quite a bit. And so, I'm just getting into all these Old Testament characters this time around, which is kind of fun.
I am too. We watched The Prince of Egypt this last weekend.
Yes.
Just to kind of start our boys thinking about Moses, and that transition from being in Egypt to of course, the story to unfold, which we won't go into great detail, but it's an amazing story, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's Courtney's favorite. I don't know if it's her favorite movie, but it's one of her favorite movies.
The music is off the charts in that movie.
Yes.
Oh, my word.
So, and there's also, I don't know if anybody's seen this yet, but at Christmas, the new Angel Studios David released, and we went and saw that. It was very good. So, highly recommend that as well.
Same. I've seen it.
Okay.
Very good.
Animated movie recommendations happening here at the beginning of the podcast this week. All right. In the New Testament, man, there's a lot. We were following along with the story of Jesus, like I said. We see more teaching from Jesus, some of which is teaching in parables, which is, a story that teaches, and even more miracles. Some of those miracles reflect on Jesus and how he's God himself. Some of them reflect on how he can help other people, like walking on water was very much Jesus on Jesus, and then feeding the 5,000 and the 4,000, that was very much for the apostles and the people. So lots of different miracles happening. Jesus does a lot of teaching using bread as an example in Matthew chapter 15 and 16 this week, talking about bread and leaven and all of that. And then also we see the faith of the Canaanite woman and the healing of her daughter. So you could put that in the miracle bracket as well. And for the first time, this was incredible to me. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 21, this is the first time we see Jesus beginning to show his apostles and his disciples what's ahead for him. Basically pointing towards the cross. This is the first time that we have that revealed to them. And then we conclude this week with something big, the transfiguration on the Mount.
Love that one.
And, I'm not going to oversimplify it, but basically where God declares, this is my beloved son, listen to him in that moment. So covered a lot in the Old Testament and the New Testament this week.
Yeah. It's amazing. I had to do like a little bit of a double take because you read about the feeding of the 5,000 And then in the following chapter, the reading of the 4,000.
Yes.
I thought, hold on a minute. Did I already read this day? And I was like, oh, my goodness, these are two separate accounts of two different events. And so, wow. Jesus was really driving the point home. And what's interesting to me is they still were wondering where they were going to get their food after seeing 9,000 people get fed. So,
and it's so interesting to see. It's like on the same page. You know, when you're reading in the Bible, it's like here they just saw a miracle of thousands of people fed with bread. Here they're like, what are we going to eat for lunch?
Right.
Where's the bread?
Isn't that crazy?
So yeah, Jesus does a lot of teaching with bread as the center of it this week.
He does. Indeed, he does.
So what things have you guys noticed? This is always something that I want to get you involved with. We have the Facebook group. Leave some comments and some thoughts on there about what you're seeing in this week's reading. And of course, leave a comment down below of this video. We'd love to hear what things you see in the big story this week. All right, Andrew, I prepped you. I said there's going to be an icebreaker question because I think it went well. I embarrassed Craig thoroughly last week.
Yes.
So I'm going to try and be a little less embarrassing this week.
Okay.
So what would you say is a guilty pleasure of yours that most people don't know about?
Oh, man. I had to really think about this for a minute.
Okay.
Let me ask you, are you a podcast listener?
I am.
Are we going to talk about a podcast on a podcast?
Podcastception. There you go. So is your guilty pleasure a podcast? I
Well,
think I might know where this is going.
It's not just podcasts, but there's one in particular.
Okay.
That maybe I'll share with you.
Okay.
I consume a lot of content through podcasts. So, I listen to some political ones, some that are fun. There's a business one that I really like called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. Just a quick plug for that one. But last year, a friend of mine recommended one that's kind of blown my mind, Harold.
Okay.
And it's called Haunted Cosmos. You ever heard of that?
I've heard you mention it once before.
Oh,
in
man.
passing.
I'm already showing my cards here.
Yeah, you are. That's okay.
It's kind of a guilty pleasure for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's very much like... It's spiritual, right?
It's spiritual.
It's spiritual. It's faith-based, but it's looking at the mystical things of this earth.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you got to be warned. It might be a little out there for
for
some of our listeners, but such a cool take on how God is still working and how His creation is still working in a realm that we don't even see in today's world. And the two guys that are on there, they really kind of talk about strange things that happen. In this world, we hear about unidentified aerial phenomenon, or we hear about these sightings or ghosts and things like that. And how do you make sense of all that stuff? You know what I mean? And they kind of take it down a spiritual route. Very intriguing to listen to. So that's kind of a little guilty pleasure.
Yeah, now you've been outed for your what you like to listen to podcast-wise. There's another podcast kind of like that I bet you've heard of called Blurry Creatures. I feel like it's a little
I've never heard
less,
of that. Blurry Creatures?
Yeah, it's also
that sounds even more
based.
sinister.
I feel like it's a little less grounded in the faith, though, if that makes any sense. So I don't even know how I can follow that up with my guilty pleasure.
I want to know yours. Come on. Let's hear it.
I was going more like I have a food guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
That's I'm really embracing. Everybody knows I love Chick-fil-A because I've used it in a sermon a couple of times. But
your Chick-fil-A stories have inspired me. I want that treatment when I go to Chick-fil-A. So I got to order on the app is what I learned.
I mean, I don't know. They call me by name. It's great.
It's amazing.
It's fantastic.
You're like the Lord of Chick-fil-A when you roll up like that.
It's great. It's great. So I also have another favorite restaurant that we could never get in the north, and so it was really special to come down south and have this, and that is Waffle House.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not a big breakfast fan. I'm not really like a greasy spoon person, but Waffle House is just the right everything. They just, I think it's probably the hash browns that do it for me.
Oh, man, dude.
So now we live 12 minutes away from a Waffle House.
Oh, yeah, you do.
So that's really changed things, even though Waffle House was kind of a hard thing in our family because I think 3 Christmases ago, Courtney got food poisoning on Christmas Day at the Waffle House in Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, okay.
So not here, in Amarillo.
Yeah, well.
So we've been slowly recovering from that, but that's a hard road,
I get it. I've been food poisoned with Chipotle twice, and I'm like, it's hard to go, but man, somehow I always seem to make my way back, So, this Waffle House that you probably go to is the one over in Catoosa?
Yes.
Dude,
yeah, that's
when my brother-in-law got married, Of course, he wasn't my brother-in-law at the time, but we were still friends. I was one of his groomsmen, and there wasn't a whole lot of planning around, his,
What's going to happen?
party or whatever. So we did a few things, but we wrapped up the night at the Waffle House.
The Waffle House.
And I will never forget. That was the last time I've been there.
And was it okay?
It was great, man. I think I had bacon and hash browns.
You never know how the Waffle House story is going to go.
It was great. Although there's some interesting characters in there.
Absolutely. That's
part of the experience.
Yeah, that's how it goes. All right. Well, I guess you can leave a comment. What guilty pleasure do you have if you want the world to know it? I don't think we'll feature it like on air or anything like that. But Andrew's, mine.
If it's outrageous enough,
yeah, we might just put it at the beginning of the show. All right. Well, back to our reading this week in the 1 Year Bible. I think we both have some interesting things that we caught this week, but I'm going to let you start. What are maybe one of the big things that you saw from the big story that we read this week, Andrew?
Well, my goodness, it's very dense in this section of Scripture. But in the Old Testament, this story of Joseph is just so captivating to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Isn't it? You think about being highly favored and receiving dreams at a very young age. Not only was he favored by Jacob, but I would say he's favored by God very early on.
Yeah.
And, he tells these stories about the dreams he has. He riles up this jealousy. It doesn't really help that Jacob, gives him the fancy, coat
of many colors.
But, we know, what happens is eventually he ends up in Egypt. He's a slave in Potiphar's house. We see how he remains faithful and steadfast to the ways of God, and God blesses him. There's I highlight certain things, and one thing is in our reading on January 20th in Genesis 41. We read that, where is it? Verse 38, and Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" So God's Spirit was in him and was evident.
Yeah.
And I had to note that, because how cool is it that the Spirit was at work even in the Old Testament? We read from creation how the Godhead worked and how they were together and all things were created together, but like to see it here and to know that we are also partaking in that in the new covenant is really cool. But perhaps even bigger than that, you kind of covered it, so I won't cover everything, but essentially, God uses Joseph to bring about a salvation for Israel.
Yeah.
And if you think of it that way, because of his visions from God, he has the opportunity to interpret Pharaoh's dream and make plans and ultimately save enough food for those seven years of famine.
Yeah.
Which in year 2 we know that Jacob sent his sons into Egypt, and they requested to buy, and just by happenstance, wow, isn't that amazing? Through God's plan,
God's
they bump into Joseph, and what we see through that is testing. We see ultimately redemption, and we see salvation, which kind of points to somebody else to come. I think it's kind of a typology for Jesus. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be careful in saying, like Abraham was an example of Jesus, Joseph was an example. I'd even say Moses is but I think over and over again throughout God's big story, we see this same answer, this same story unfolding, and then the ultimate time that it unfolds, it's without blemish. It's perfect. Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice, right? People are redeemed once and for all. So it's like, I think the Old Testament especially does a great job of giving you all of these leaders that redeem their people over and over again. The people continue to fall. A leader comes and redeems them, and then it's all wrapped up in Jesus being the ultimate redeemer for all people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
It's amazing. I love how, as the story unfolds, Joseph is kind of testing his brothers, and he's trying to understand where their hearts are at, I think. Judah kind of stands out as one who's really done an about-face, and, when he has to bring Benjamin back up, he says, hey, we have to do this because otherwise we won't get we won't be able to get the food because of this relationship with Joseph. And he essentially tells Jacob, he says, hey, look, if they do anything to him, it's going to happen to me. Essentially, I'm going to die in his place so you don't lose.
Absolutely.
You lose him. What a complete turn, for him. And ultimately, I think that's part of this story is like, yes, you did something bad at one point and you messed up. You sinned against Joseph. You sinned against God. You sinned against your father. But ultimately, through time, things change. People change, and that's a beautiful part of how God uses people who are unexpected, which you kind of alluded to in your sermon here yesterday.
Not too far gone.
Not too far gone. It's very and so I guess the final thing maybe I'll throw out, and it's kind of interesting to me. I wonder how it hits you, but after Jacob dies, his brothers are worried. They're like, man, maybe Joseph was only being nice to us because our father was still alive.
Yeah,
and they end up communicating to him. Jacob told us that you should treat us well. Dad said, and Joseph says, "Who am I?
Yeah,
am I God? Am I the judge?" And I love just how he has not only forgiven his brothers, but even given the opportunity to enact some sort of revenge on them. He chooses mercy.
Yeah, and this could just be my speculation, but reading that, it's like, Dad said this on his deathbed, which is completely made up. Like they fabricated that, right? And Joseph's response to that is, he doesn't respond to Dad's claim at all. He just responds to them directly.
Yeah.
Like, it's like he almost saw through the fact that they even needed to say that. He's like, it's not up to me. You're forgiven for me. And I'm not God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, that's a powerful thing.
That's a power move, man.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. I'm just so enamored with Joseph. And I mean, what a story and what an example. And, he's highly revered.
Yeah.
In Bible studies and as an example of somebody of the faith. And there's a reason why.
Absolutely.
And given all the reasons to turn his back on God or turn his back on faith, turns back on his family. He chose not to. Yeah,
and he wrestled through all of those, which I think is maybe part of the inspiring part of his story. Is like he didn't have it, sunshine and roses the entire time he was in Egypt. Yeah. He wrestled with how to treat his brothers when they were standing right in front of him. Yeah. And then, obviously, as we get into the story of Moses, the nation of Israel still wrestles through many things. Because I have a little nugget that I don't know why I thought of this time. Okay. But so where does Jacob and all the boys live? They live in the land of Canaan, right? Mm-hmm. And so they come to Egypt. It's likely to say that it was a day, maybe 2 days journey to come and get grain from Joseph in Egypt and head back home, right?
Right.
That is the same Canaan that when Moses gets everyone out of Egypt, or God gets everyone out of Egypt, they wander in the desert for 40 years to get back to the same place that's like a day or two away.
Right.
And so I think wander is definitely the best description of what took place, because they were about 39.999 years overboard of how long it should have taken them. To get back to Canaan.
Isn't that crazy?
I know. I just thought of that as I read this week. It's not really earth-shattering, but as you read this story, you're like, wait, Canaan's not that far away.
Right.
And they were in the desert for 40 years.
It wasn't because Moses was stupid or something.
No, it wasn't his fault.
It was really a refining, type of activity.
Yeah.
And it had its purpose, and it's unfortunate that it had to happen, but they had the wonder in the wilderness, for God's plan to work to fruition. I don't want to go too far into that, but
we're not quite there yet.
But it's not that far. And even Jacob, who's an old man, I forget how old he is when he meets Pharaoh. Is he 130? I think he died at 147. Does that sound right?
I don't know.
He was very old. Even Pharaoh says, "How old are you?" To me, when I read that, I was like, "Yeah, he must have looked pretty old." And Jacob's like, "Well, I'm not even as old as my ancestors were, Pharaoh. However, I'm 130, you know? And I just thought, wow. So the point is even at advanced age, he made, you know, it wouldn't have been an easy journey, but nevertheless, it was a manageable enough journey for him to make.
But on the way back, a whole generation passed, you know,
right.
A whole generation passed on the way there. So I'm going to take us over to the New Testament for just a minute. There's so much in the New Testament. Jesus, miracles, teaching in the parables, but there's one parable that we all know. I feel like we know it really well, and that's the parable of the sower. But for some reason, I've heard this my whole life, and it wasn't until a couple years ago that it really hit me. So the parable of the sower, Jesus basically says there's seeds sown 4 different places, right? Some is on the path where the birds come and devour it. Other seeds fall on the rocky ground where they don't have much soil, and so they immediately spring up, but then they wither away. And some fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up with them, choked them out. They didn't make it. But other seed fell on the good soil and produced grain, 100-fold, 60, 30-fold.
Yeah.
And so the apostles kind of ask, like, what does this parable mean, right? And Jesus essentially says, this refers to people.
Yeah.
And following me, coming into the faith and being devoured by Satan or things of this world or withering out or whatever it might be. And so it's a simple parable, even though it needed some explanation, that we've all probably heard dozens of times.
Sure.
And it wasn't until a couple years ago when somebody said this in a sermon, and I never thought about it. It's easy math to figure out that only a quarter of the seed of the people was fruitful and multiplied. And I never did that simple math. I was only in engineering school for like a year and a half, so I should have been able to do that simple math, right?
For you, Harold. Yeah.
So, the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, none of them made it, but the fourth quarter was the one that grew up. And I think there's something powerful in that. It's not sad, even though that's the first place we go.
Yeah.
It's important for us to realize that I think we often get discouraged by the soil that's in the rocky ground that we sowed seed.
Yeah.
And it was excited, it grew up, but it didn't have any roots, so it fell over.
Yeah.
The people that we get excited, fired up for Jesus, they think they're on board, and then they never show back up to church after that first month.
Right.
And it's like, we get discouraged by that. We get discouraged when somebody grows up in the faith, but they also let the weeds and the thorns grow up with them, and they're choked out later in life by the secret sin that we could have helped them with, we could have walked alongside them with. The important thing I think we need to remember that even Jesus declares that our job is to be sowers, not to see fruition, everybody being 100-fold reproducing. And so that's encouraging to me, even though on the surface, it feels like, man, only a quarter of the people I even try are gonna grow up in the faith, are gonna serve Jesus. But I think there's actually hope in that, is that our job is to be a sower and to walk alongside those people. And in the math, it's just the math. Some of them are going to, 3/4 of them are likely going to go away, and that's not for us to wear.
That's right.
That's for them.
That's right.
So I don't know. I just thought about that a lot this week.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things that hit my mind whenever you're talking about it. One of them is, this isn't like a performance-based system that God has just brought into fruition in the new covenant. Sometimes we really want to gauge like how effective we are, or how successful we are. How cool would it be if I could get, these kind of results? But really, all God is really calling us to it. And what I'm hearing is to say, by faith, sow the seed. And we read later on in 1 Corinthians that this idea of Paul planted, Apollos watered, and God brings the increase. And so focus on just planting. Yeah. And even if it's a quarter of all that you do, wouldn't it be cool if you just are busy planting? Yeah. When he comes back, and that's what you've been focused on, and not worried about, the ground and who's going to, but be really focused on just planting the seed. I like that.
Be a scatterer.
Be a scatterer.
Not one who looks back and says, man, the birds are back on the path eating my seed again.
Right. And get
Don't
discouraged.
Worry about that. Yeah.
Right.
It's about, let's keep on sowing, because a quarter of what I put out there is going to produce,
exactly.
And so that's inspiring to me, even though it took me 20 years to realize that simple math of only a quarter are going to be anything, but a quarter's worth sowing for.
It is. Amen. So, amen.
Did you have something? I think you had something from the New Testament too. You were kind of preemptively telling me.
Well, there's just a lot. But one thing that I wanted to bring up is in the later part of our reading. There's so much I want to talk about.
There is.
But the Transfiguration is just so fascinating to me. I had to read it a couple of times, and then I ended up, trying to find more information and try to understand. There's a reason why Elijah and Moses are chosen to be there on the mountain, is kind of one thing I learned. Moses represents the law, and Elijah represents the prophets. And so Jesus is the fulfillment
of the law and the prophets.
Of the law and the prophets.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the people who personify those are present. I think what's interesting to me is when I read that, I read that Elijah and Moses are physically there. Is how I interpret that. Now, there's many ways that I've come to through Bible study that people are interpreting this.
Yeah, that's.
But Peter, right? He says, Jesus, I'll build 3 tents.
Yeah.
For you each to tabernacle.
Very physical. Yeah.
Very physical type response to them being there. And then I think, well, man, how in the world can that be?
Yeah.
How in the world can that be?
I mean,
how can Elijah was taken up. So he and Enoch, I've always learned, right, where the two never died, right?
Yes.
They just were taken with God, however that happens.
However that looks like works.
Elijah's, we know a little bit more. This chariot of fire, this sort of deal. And then Moses, of course, we know didn't get to enter the promised land. And God took him up to look at what was to come for the children of Israel to inherit, and then God took him.
Yeah.
And we read in Jude that there was like a dispute between Michael, I believe, and Satan over his body on that mountain. Yep. You remember that?
Yep.
And so we know, I guess my point is, sorry, I'm going around the trail. The point is Moses died, right?
Yes, he's dead.
And so, how did this happen? And so, there's interesting ways of understanding this, and I don't want to get too haunted cosmos here, but, there is a way that you could understand this, that because God exists out of our dimension, out of our time and space, he can bring back people because he doesn't exist in time like we do.
Yeah.
And so in ways that I don't really think we need to get into, but like it is possible for him to bring Elijah and to bring Moses back. Now, could they have been just spiritual beings,
right.
of who they were? That's another explanation. It's just fascinating. What's cool, and then I want to get your take on it, is while all this is going on, God appears essentially in a cloud and comes over.
Yes.
And he confirms the divinity of Jesus. And of course, Jesus is completely transfigured. He's shining bright as the sun. His clothes are white. He's glorified in his own way. And God, in a very real way, affirms that he is the Son of God. Powerful. And then Jesus tells his disciples, he says, hey, who was it, Peter? John?
Peter, James, and John, I believe.
Peter, James, and John, yeah.
Peter, James, and John.
He says, you can't tell anybody about this until after I come back from the grave, essentially. And that was it, And so it means a lot of things. I think the more you ponder it, the more mysterious all of it becomes, and how big God is.
Yeah.
We talk about a big God. You talk about showing up in a big way that my tiny brain can't understand. On the mount.
With people that don't exist anymore?
With people that don't exist anymore.
I don't know a better way to say that.
I know. And so I also did a little bit of like Googling and stuff, and like, Moses obviously going to the top of Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments. We also know that Elijah had a cave that he went to when Jezebel was chasing him up on Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai and Mount Hermon is where they believe Jesus was for Mount of Transfiguration.
Okay.
Because that's really close to Caesarea Philippi.
Sure. And
it's a significant place. This mountain theme and how these guys were on the mountain and how God reveals himself. When Moses went up in the cloud, we have no idea what was going on, but did it kind of look like this?
Yeah.
Who knows? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating to see how God reveals his glory in this way.
Yeah.
And how inspiring and awestruck it would have been to actually been there and seen that, know? How's it hit you though, Harold? I'm curious.
One thing, I'm going to go a little different side of it is, okay, so God says, I'm going to see if I can get the exact wording. This is my son of whom I'm well pleased. Is that what God says?
Or do what he says.
Oh, yeah, do what he says.
I think is what I may say. Yeah,
so let me make sure I get this right. This is my beloved son with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him.
Listen to him.
There you got it. We hit it in all the ways.
Yes.
It reminds me a lot, though, of when Jesus is baptized and the Father speaks there, too.
Yes.
And says, this is my son. And so it's interesting to me, and I don't think this is for everybody that's taking place in history. I don't think this is for Peter to hear this. I think that phrase from God was for us to hear. Yeah. And I think that was the case when Jesus comes up out of the water, too.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit comes down like a dove, and the Father speaks there, too. I think there's ample evidence of Jesus being more than a prophet, more than a man, that he is the Son of God, God on earth. And God makes that. The Father makes that crystal clear time and time again. And on the mountain at the Transfiguration is yet another time. Even though I can't explain much more of what's going on there.
Dude.
And I don't think Peter could either, because he's like, should I build 3 tents? Like, it's a very Peter response,
It is, isn't it?
I think I could wrap my head around 3 tents, and it's the same for me, Peter.
Yeah. I don't know what to do, but I know how to do this. I'll just build 3 tents,
Yeah.
I love where you're going, though. It reminds me of something, Jesus is prophet, priest, and king.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it interesting how if he is the fulfillment of the prophets and the old law, that is your prophet and priest
at the same time,
and Jesus or God is affirming him as king. It's
yeah.
all 3.
Yeah,
and he's the only one who I'm aware of, and that's why he's the Messiah, who is all 3 of those things.
Absolutely,
isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is amazing.
Amazing.
So there's a lot.
There's a lot there.
That was, by the way, the Transfiguration. We read it. It was like it's like this much, in the book. It's like this much of a page,
right.
And that's mainly what we talked about here. So, anything else to add? I think we hit it. We probably went over our time even.
I think we hit it.
Okay.
And I guess what I would just say is, isn't it amazing how God is always at work and working through people who we may see as unworthy, but God's will is never thwarted.
Yeah.
Because people aren't good enough, right? He always works through it. And it's amazing to see how that works through the Old Testament, and it's amazing to see how all it comes together with Jesus.
Yeah.
May God be praised.
Yeah. And it's easy to see how, like, that was obviously the sermon I had to give yesterday, right? I mean, it just kind of was like, God keeps poking me with this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it.
So good. So good. That means God can use a guy like me.
Absolutely.
A sinner like me. And he's obviously using you.
And he can use a sinner like you and me because he's made us saints.
Amen.
And that's the powerful thing. Amen. Sinners made saints.
Love that.
I love it too. All right, guys. Well, what are some things that you saw in this week's reading or next week's reading of the 1 Year Bible as we're reading through the Old Testament and the New Testament, a psalm and a proverb every day? Don't be afraid. You can leave a nugget about psalms or proverbs there as well. We'd love to. I think maybe one of these days we'll do maybe just a proverb special. Ooh. Where that's the rules. You just have to pick out of the proverbs that we've read so far this year. So let us know. Leave a comment down below. And of course, engage with this video, engage with the Facebook group. And we love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, until next week, I will see you then. Andrew, thank you for being on this week.
Man.
Appreciate it a lot.
Anytime.
Leave a comment. We will see you again next week on the Big Things from the Big Story podcast.